There was no indication of the development of an illegal market or of the substitution of EGMs with other types of gambling. A reduction in other types of gambling is interpreted as an indication of synergistic effects between games. Reduced gambling participation among the most active gamblers and amongst risk gamblers showed the reductions in gambling availability had an effect even on highly involved gamblers. Isn't that interesting? It's almost counterintuitive, but that's the one social experiment that we can point to. So really, for the council, as every council in New Zealand that deals with this issue, the question is, what is in the best well-being, to use an old local government expression, not a current one, what is in the well-being of the community, and what kind of a city are we looking to develop here? And that's the decision I would suggest that you're faced with tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Graham. Thank you also, George. Councillors, we have got some time, so with the leave of the meeting, if there are questions of either Graham or George, we're happy to take those. Councillor Panek, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you for coming in. I presume you're aware that we're going to, we've tried to reduce the numbers, but we haven't put in place a sinking lid. Could you just tell us briefly about your experience with councils that have put in a sinking lid policy and what the impacts have been?
Yeah. You're given so little tools to deal with this, and sinking lid is the greatest. But I'll give you one practical example because it's a personal one. In the Northland Council, when I sat on a council, we introduced a sinking lid policy, and we went from being in the top third of expenditure to the bottom third, and the other Northland councils remain in the top third. And that's taken 15 years. Which is a long time, but that was the most that we could do. And and it's when you start looking at the impact, you start thinking, what can I and should I do here? Was my experience. Sorry.
Councillor Ritchie.
Yes, thank you. I'll probably
borrow mine.
Just so that people can hear them. We do have limited tools, as you've said. So, do you think that it is appropriate for us to perhaps make submissions to Parliament, or what else can we do? We probably can't do it tonight. We can't do it tonight. But what else could we do as a council? We'd have to change the rules.
That's a good question. The gambling number 3 bill is in front of Parliament as we speak, and that would certainly be something to do. But I think the main thing that we can do as councils is what we can under the Gambling Act, and to actually look for and talk about what we're seeing in our communities and what impact that has on our people.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Graham. Thank you, George. Thank you for your time and public participation today, and thank you, councillors, for your questions. I'd like to invite Raj Nana up to speak as a public participant on behalf of the New Zealand Racing Board. Raj, as a speaker on behalf of an organisation, you've also got 10 minutes, and we'll also allow you the opportunity to answer questions should we have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hello all. My name is Raj. I'm from the New Zealand Racing Board. I am in a government relations role there. Our Chief Executive, Mr John Allen, couldn't join us and he sends his apologies. The New Zealand Racing Board, for those of you who don't know, we run the sole betting agency in New Zealand, the TAB. The purpose, the way it's set up, we're a statutory body, and the purpose is to direct all the benefits from betting back to the racing industry and the sport sector. I just want to make 3 very brief points to you this evening, and then we can move on to any questions you may have. The first is about the policy itself that you're asked to vote on tonight. We support the policy. I think it's fair to say we didn't agree with every amendment that officials made, but we feel like the balance between providing people the opportunity to have a bet or play on the pokies was balanced against trying to minimise the harm and regulate that as best as you could. So we support it for that reason. The second point I wanted to make was just in respect of the process. This is the third time I've spoken to a number of you. We first engaged with council on a very narrow issue. There was an allowance, an allocation in Johnsonville. We've got a TAB there. Our people wanted to be able to provide gaming, and we reached out to council and started talking to officials in June last year. So 16 months on, we're at the end of the process, and throughout we've tried to engage constructively. And the message I wanted to leave you with tonight is that we don't see this as the end of the process. So if any councillors have any reservations or any questions over the course of the next 3 years as the policy's in place, then please feel free to give me a call. We're very keen to talk to councils when we can and to engage with officials and elected representatives. And the last point I wanted to make was just that the racing board and the racing community sees itself as part of the Wellington region and the Wellington city community. Just one example I wanted to give you. Next year, the Wellington Racing Club has joined up with with New Zealand Rugby to hold a week of sporting events. So it's going to kick off on the 23rd of January with Wellington Cup. On that Monday, I just recently discovered the Black Caps will play Pakistan, which will be fantastic. It's a fantastic time to be a New Zealand cricket supporter. And then that'll be rounded out by the Sevens. That's going to be a blockbuster week for Wellington, and it's something that we're very proud to be a part of, and we think it's going to be fantastic for the city. So those are the 3 points I wanted to make. If you had any questions, thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Raj. Any questions from councillors? No, there have been no questions. Thank you very much for your participation today. Councillors, I'd like to move to the first report, which I'm happy to introduce, and in fact I'm just going to move. It relates to the adoption of the 2016 Council and Committee meeting schedule, which is attached for your interest on page 9 as well. There are very few changes from traditional council convention, particularly relating to the spacing of the meetings and also periods of councillors having some ability to go and take some annual leave in January and July also. I'm happy to move. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Free. All those in favour, we'll move to the voting board. Could you please vote, councillors? I declare that carried. Thank you very much, councillors. I'll now hand over to Councillor Pannett to introduce Report 2.2, the Joint Committee on the Wellington Region Waste Management and Minimisation Plan. And simply for information, at the end, once it's been moved, councillors, and following any debate, we'll also seek their nominations for councillors to join that committee. Thank you, Councillor Pannett.
Thank you. Well, I would have been happy for you to introduce this. Councillors, I am supporting this. Hopefully it will not be another talk fest, but we do need a forum for those of us who are involved in the waste area to be looking at those regional issues, making sure that we implement a very strong waste management and minimisation plan. So given that we've had a lot of discussion now about cooperating more as a region, looking at the way that we deliver services, I think it is a good idea. Without moving to a CCO or anything like that, it will be a way to look at whether we've got the right initiatives in place. And we know that there are some policy differences at the moment which are causing a few issues in terms of pricing. Also, of course, we've got some issues over our landfill over Porirua Way, so it might be a good idea to look at that regionally as well. But this is a big, complex area, many millions of dollars of expenditure at stake, so I personally would find such a forum useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pannett. I'm happy to second. Do we have any speakers on the speaking list? No, there being none. Councillor Pannett, do you have a wish to exercise your right of reply? No. Before we vote on the recommendations, I'd like to call for nominations. I'm happy to nominate Councillor Pannett, who has expressed some interest. You're happy to second Councillor Pannett? Any other councillors seek to be nominated or nominations from other councillors? No, I think with the leave of the meeting we can declare Councillor Pannett as our nominee to sit on the committee. And we'll now vote on the recommendations, councillors. I think councillors will declare that carried. Congratulations, Councillor Pannett. I'm sure you do a sterling job. Now I'd like to move to the committee reports, report 3.1, and I'd like to ask Councillor Eagle to please introduce the report on the gambling venues policy and feedback on consultation.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillors, we bring your attention to the gambling venues policy. We have debated this at length through the Community Sport and Recreation Committee. Just a reflection on the process. It's certainly been a trying one, but we've got there. Can I start by thanking all those who put in submissions? We got 751 of them, of which 713 came through from the Problem Gambling Foundation. They undertook a campaign to ensure that those most impacted by gambling were able to have their say, and I applaud them for that. We also, we've heard from the New Zealand Racing Board and other stakeholders impacted by this, and I think that we got a well balanced view. Can I say, in terms of this piece of work, gambling harm is a big one, and those of you who were on the previous Community Sport and Recreation Committee would have heard from two people who came into this room and spoke about their personal experiences, and I think in terms of their battles, that brought home the reality of and the importance really of this key piece of social policy. I do want to note that in terms of what we're being presented with, it is for final approval, but there's really, in a nutshell, only minor changes proposed, and I know Councillor Free's got an amendment that she will raise, which I will be supporting. Just a quick background. We did say in this policy that we will be reducing the limit from 565 to 439 poker machines in the suburban zones. There will be changes also with the central area zone. We'll be amending the relocation policy, and we'll be looking at how new venues in terms of how they locate within a zone or anywhere in a zone will be subject now to number restrictions. We've heard, and some of you have mentioned to me, that we've had, in terms of a council, we have limited powers, and there are changes there. I think I will finish there because we have traversed the issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eagle. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Ritchie, thank you for seconding. And on the speaking list, I've got one speaker, Councillor Free. Do you wish to speak?
Yes, most of you will be aware that I have sought to bring an amendment, which I think perhaps now is the time to ask it to be tabled. And there's also, for those of you who are getting a bit confused by the numbers involved, Baz has actually prepared quite a useful table of what the numbers were under the 210 policy, what the existing machines in each zone are, what the proposal on the table suggests, and what my amendment suggests. My amendment really just is a very fine tweaking. There are the limits in the southern, eastern and northern zones are currently pretty much full. There's a little bit of space for new machines. We're not proposing any real changes for those zones. But my interest really focused on the other zones, the Lambton, the western and the Onslow and central area zones, where it was proposed to have the existing number of machines plus allow for an extra 2 venues. Now, the reason to allow for some extra venues was to allow for a little bit of movement from those aforementioned zones, which are currently pretty full, to maybe areas where there are fewer machines and potentially less harm. to be gained from problem gambling. However, my position is really I don't want to be presiding over a council where we actually approve a large increase overall in the number of machines over above the current situation. So I'm just actually proposing that in those venues where we are having an increase, that we just allow for one extra venue, which is 9 machines over and above what is currently operating and existing in our city. This is in the background of several factors that I considered when I brought this amendment. One of them was the large number of submissions from the Problem Gambling Foundation, but not just from them, from other organisations, about the actual harm that's done from people who are addicted to these machines and the actual addictive nature, which I've witnessed myself, even amongst my own family members, how enthralling these machines can be and how the environment in which they're situated is quite unreal and quite mesmerising. And having visited 3 establishments in my own ward of Kilburnie, I have seen for myself how people are just sitting there mesmerised and feeding money into these machines. So in my view, the fewer that we actually have in the city, the better, really. But you have to balance that with the rights of people to actually enjoy this kind of activity in a sort of a managed way, and with the obvious benefits that do come from the funds that return to the community. At the same time, bearing in mind that out of the 100% of funds that are lost by gamblers, actually only 40% comes back to the community. So there is a net loss of money to our communities through these machines. It gets redistributed, but overall there is a bit of a net loss. I don't know much, I haven't got much else to say. I mean, my amendment makes only the minest, really a minor bit of difference, but I consider it a difference in the right direction, and I'm hoping that you'll support it.
Thank you, Councillor Free, and I understand Councillor Pannett's wishing to second.
And just briefly, because Councillors Eagle and Free have covered the issues very well. So look, I'm going to support this simply for the reason that it reduces the number of pokies. I think while some people may consider there are some benefits, the harms clearly outweigh those benefits. And I would like to see a much stronger reduction. One of the issues with the sinking lid is that it does give people a bit of a competitive advantage. It is a bit problematic. But I think the overall thing, as I've said to the Problem Gambling Foundation, is that we are going in the right direction as a city. The numbers are decreasing. Unfortunately, it may mean that people go online, but nevertheless, that's not our jurisdiction. So we're just going to focus on what we can control. So thank you, Councillor Free, and to officers for all the work that you've done. I appreciate it's taken quite a lot of time, and I'm glad that it's on the table.
Thank you, Councillor Pannett. I have no other councillors. Okay, yes, I'll speak briefly, simply to say that I'll support the amendment also for the reasons outlined by both Councillors Free and Councillor Pannett. Councillor Marsh, Councillor Apeni-Mercer.
Thanks. Look, I'm disappointed about regarding the process. We've had any number of meetings. We've sat through submissions, and we arrived at this point, and then at the last meeting, we have a change. And you look at some of the changes. I personally feel that if the council does feel the way she's outlined, then she should be moving that we don't have any of these pokie machines at all across the entire city. I heard Councillor Pannett say the numbers are decreasing. We know that that's the case. I believe we should let them decrease organically, not try to tinker with the process. And we also heard too from organisations in the submissions that do depend on these machines for their income. And don't forget that these organisations do one heck of a lot of good around the city. So for those reasons, I won't be supporting these amendments. They may well go through, probably will, but I don't feel that I can support them.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Councillor Apeni-Mercer.
I have for when Councillor Free does her right of reply is, and it's partially picking up on Councillor Marsh's, can she explain the methodology by which the particular numbers, the methodology, because I'm also inclined to say, why not go for 0? But that's not what you're proposing. You're proposing these changes, and And while I don't profess to be an expert on these machines, because I don't use them and I don't personally know anybody who does, I'm wondering why, perhaps in the Eastern Ward, which Councillor Free's part represents, why, and I know there are the same kinds of issues that are in Lambton, Onslow, Central Zone. They're the same issues. Why we aren't proposing, through your methodology, to reduce likewise all those? I'm puzzled by that. Community benefit, Councillor Marsh has talked about that. Can I just say that while that in itself is not an outstanding reason to do nothing, the fact is nothing is not the case. These things are reducing. We are attempting to control it. It went through a committee process. So I'm sort of slightly puzzled by, again, at this very late stage, of why some areas, despite the fact that the same issues are across all the areas, why are we cherry picking here? And please explain the methodology. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Apini Mercer. Councillor Wolfe.
I'm in the middle of this. I'm listening to the discussion quite eagerly. Sorry. I'd like to know whether the amendment has officer support. And that's the question I have.
Councillor Wolfe, we don't have an opportunity to seek advice from officers through this process. However, Councillor Free can advise in her right of reply. I don't have any other councillors on the speaking list, which I'll invite Councillor Free to deliver her right of reply.
Well, I'm finding this quite fascinating, actually. Is it true, Councillor Marsh, and well, I'm just wondering if Councillor Marsh and Councillor Apina Mercer would really want a zero number of pokie machines in our city? If so, I'd be delighted, but I don't think that the law would actually allow us to do that. So it's a little bit like legal highs. We might not approve them, but pokie machines are legal, and the government has said that they will be somewhere in our city. It's the only thing we can do is have a look at how and where and what we do about their placing, and that's what this is about. And asking about the methodology, you might as well ask why the officer chose to allow the current number plus 2 venues. And what was the methodology behind that? You have to start somewhere, I guess. And I just came from a position where I thought that we are allowing an increase, but why allow more of an increase than we need to? So I did seek officer advice. This does have cautious officer support. I mean, they obviously came up with the paper we have in front of them. I had a different view, and I'm bringing it to the table. I did ask if this was an acceptable thing to do, and the advice was yes, because this is actually an increase we're proposing. We're actually proposing an increase in the number of machines. This is not actually going to reduce funding by itself. The funding will stay intact. All the machines that are currently operating will be operational. We know that TAB actually aspires to have some in the northern zone. They can. There's room there for them to put extra in. I've said that we have, capacity with this amendment for an extra venue in all of the zones that are identified, not obviously the ones which currently have up to their 2010 limit. But there is room for extra machines, therefore there's room for more funding, not actually less. As to the community benefit, I noted that even some of the people who acknowledge the benefits say that they feel uncomfortable knowing that that benefit, that money has actually come from people whose families can probably least afford it in some cases. And if you are in the family of a problem gambler, you're actually in a very powerless situation where your family member is going out and spending money that you actually often need in your household. And so what good is it for if you're a kid in that situation to know that somewhere down the line a cricket club is getting new uniforms or new bats? That's actually not really why necessarily how we want to get our money. It's a reality, but I don't know that that's enough of a reason in itself to want to have lots and lots of pokie machines. Yes, the numbers are reducing, but why shouldn't we reinforce that message by actually saying that's a good thing? We actually want to acknowledge that and follow that with not allowing a massive increase or more of an increase than we need to. The increase that I'm proposing allows for a little bit of flexibility. It's an increase of 9 machines in some wards over and above what's there. It allows for a little bit of flexibility to transition. And as to why this has been a long process, well, actually, I raised this issue at the CSR meeting, and I did have quite a lot of support around the table at that meeting, because we'd all listened to the submissions. We'd heard about the problems. We'd actually had to listen in private, because some of these people are so shy about talking about what gambling has done in their lives. They actually didn't want to do it in an open forum. So I was there. I listened to all those submissions, as did many of the people around this table. And that's partly what's brought me to do what I can to address the things that I heard. Cherry picking, well, you do what you can with the tools that you have. And that's what I'm trying to do here. As I say, there was a lot of support around the CSR table. At that time when I tried to bring an amendment, it was difficult to work out exactly what numbers to put down because of the way the original paper was worded and the difficulties we had of knowing what we were doing and being confident. At the time it was discussed to bring it actually to council, and that's what I'm doing now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Free. The recommendation, or the amendment's been moved and seconded. We'll now vote. Councillors. I declare the amendment carried. Any councillors wish to speak to the amended substantive? No. Councillor Eagle, right of reply? No. No interest in exercising the right of reply. We'll now vote on the amended substantive. I declare the policy carried. Thank you very much, councillors, for your contribution. We'll now move to the report of the Environment Committee of 17 September 2015. I'll invite Councillor Pannett to introduce the report on the proposed camping bylaw amendments. Councillor Ritchie, you want to defer to Councillor Ritchie? Councillor Ritchie, please feel free.
Move. I don't think there needs to be a lot of explanation. You are all familiar with the challenges that we've had on the south coast in relation to camping ground. These minor bylaw changes are an attempt to address them. I move the report. Thank you.
Councillor Pannett will second. Anyone wish to speak? No. Councillors will vote on the recommendations. I declare those recommendations carried. Councillor Pannett. Councillor Ritchie.
Now, this is a matter for lengthy debate. It is the shifting of a fence from one side of a park to another for dogs and dog exercising. I move the recommendation.
Councillor Pannett will second. On the speaking list. We'll allow Councillor Sparrow to second this. Councillor Marsh.
Councillor Sparrow not speaking. Look, having had a lot of experience with dog areas, this is a larger area, which is great, but it does need to be well maintained. There is a dog exercise area over at Greta Point, but for quite a bit of the year, it's a muddy patch. And so I think it's all very well to say, here is a dog exercise area, but we do need to maintain it. Interesting too, while we're on the dog subject, that last weekend we moved to daylight saving time, and this is the date that we use to say dogs must not be on certain beaches and exercise areas after 9 in the morning. And experience shows that from September 22nd, which is invariably the start of daylight saving, through to October, very few people actually use our beaches, particularly during the week. And I'm looking forward to us tackling the dog policy, because I happen to notice that Pororua is quite forward thinking, that they actually have November the 1st as their restricted hours start, and up until 10 o'clock you can take your dogs on the beach. Mayor Nick Lear, I have to applaud you, and I hope that we can do the same thing. hasn't changed since our dog
Thank you,
policy
Councillor
started.
Marsh. Councillor Ritchie, right of reply.
Well, I need to reply just to say that nothing of that Councillor Marsh had to say was relevant to the issue at hand. This is not about Greta. This is not about...
Councillor Ritchie, could you please sit while we listen to the point of order? Councillor Marsh.
Misrepresentation, because I did say that the area was larger, and in reference to the park area that we are talking about here.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. You do make a valid point, and you also talked about dogs. Councillor Ritchie, please proceed.
Yes, you are correct. The only point of relevance that Councillor Marsh had to say was that he said dog. So, Greta Point is not Ian Galloway. Ian Galloway Park has no beaches, Councillor, and Porirua is not mentioned in the recommendation. I move.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. We'll now vote on the recommendations. Councillor Pannett. I declare the recommendations carried. We'll now move to report 3.3, report of the Regulatory Processes Committee, meeting of 17th September 2015. Councillor Ahapini Mercer.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Look, this is fairly straightforward. The only thing that I would say, though, for the benefit of those councillors who are privy to the meetings, that there are a range of matters that come before us for consideration that under the delegations are not required to come before full council. So by no means, for instance, at this meeting, were only these matters traversed. I just bring that by way of informing. In fact, there was a contentious issue, but I'm not here to go through that, as Councillor Pannett knows, and I spoke to her about afterwards. So I move the recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor Foster, wish to second? Do you wish to speak? No. We'll now vote on the recommendations. The first one's 1A, B and C. All those in favour? Please vote. Declare the recommendations carried. We'll now vote. You don't wish to speak separately to the next set of recommendations. Thanks, Councillor Mercer. We'll now vote on the second set of recommendations. Councillor Eagle. I declare those recommendations carried. The report of the Governance, Finance and Planning Committee, meeting of 23rd September relating to the project and program budget update, which we traversed just last week. I'm happy to move. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Foster. Let's discuss. Any councillors wish to speak? No, we'll vote on the recommendations. Councillor Eagle. Declare the recommendations carried unanimously. Now, councillors will move into public excluded. Do we have any members of the public still remaining? I'll read them. I move the motion to go into public excluded session and permit Adam Holloway and Kerry Anderson.